What is going on, everybody? We have made it to one of my favorite times of the year, draft grades season, baby. I'm especially excited for all of those incoming comments telling me just how useless draft grades are. Look, I know one thing. I didn't spend the last 4 months grinding college tape to not tell you guys how I think every team found value in this weekend's NFL draft, and how I see all of these players fitting in with their new teams. So today, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on every single pick from the AFC East, including any undrafted free agent steals that stood out to me as well. Before we do get started though, guys, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I know it sounds silly, but especially in a video like this, it does such a good job telling YouTube to suggest this video out to other NFL sickos just like you guys, so I really appreciate if you could take just a second to hit that down below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss all 8 of my divisional draft grades videos. But let's go ahead and get started with the Buffalo Bills. They take Maxwell Hairston at the back end of the first round. Athletic, twitchy corner with a lot of ball production at Kentucky. A constant threat to have a pick six anytime he gets his hands on the ball. And he is a scheme fit based on what he did at Kentucky with the Bills, playing a lot of that quarters, off-zone coverage stuff. Maxwell Hairston's going to plug right in and fit. Was it a tick earlier than I would have preferred to take Hairston? Yeah, and that's why I give this a B for a good pick, not a slam dunk A pick or anything like that. I don't think he's a can't miss prospect or anything like that. What will be really interesting about Maxwell Hairston, I think, is just didn't really play a lot of man coverage at Kentucky at all. And, you know, the Bills, of course, don't play a lot of man coverage themselves, but if they want the option to do that, which they should, and they will eventually run man coverage at some point, even if it's just a few times a game, how Maxwell Hairston's able to handle that, kind of playing more physical press man coverage at times, will be interesting. You know, he's got shorter arms, he's a little bit more of a slender player. But overall, it's a pick I can get behind. I think he brings a lot of upside to the position for the Bills. And, you know, this was a cornerback class that really, brought a lot of question marks to the table, especially with who they had the option to pick here. You know, Jahdae Barron was off the board, obviously, but, we really found out about Will Johnson. Like, teams are really scared about the injuries there. You also have Benjamin Morrison and Savon Ravel coming off the ACL injury. I will say, I think Trey Amos was a really clean prospect and would have fit really well, and I even had Trey Amos above Maxwell Hairston. We'll see how that ends up aging. He went to the Washington Commanders, but Maxwell Hairston wasn't perfectly clean either. He did have an allegation in college. I saw a lot of people saying when I was really slamming Mike Green and his character and that pick by the Ravens from an ethical standpoint, bringing up Maxwell Hairston's name, and you're right, I can't just pick my battles. I should at least mention there was an allegation in college with Hairston, but look, the Bills could have used an edge rusher too, and they very clearly were more comfortable with the interviews on Hairston. I've heard some stuff about the interviews with Mike Green that are very telling, and this is not nearly to the degree of Mike Green's issues where Green had multiple accusations and got kicked out of his first college. So I'll at least mention it on Hairston, and you just pray that whatever that situation was, it was not true, and that he is growing up as a young adult. And I'm just going to leave it there, and surely the comments aren't going to go nuts over that comment, but I agree. I need to at least bring it up if I'm going to slam Mike Green, so there you have it. But overall, good pick, a lot of upside, but, you know, this was a little bit more of a risky prospect as well. So we're going to go with a B grade for the Bills with that 30th pick. And then day 2 comes along, and they trade up for TJ Sanders. Now, when this happened live, I saw the chat say they gave up 2 second-round picks to get TJ Sanders, and I was like, oh, I hate that. This is why we need to do these videos, because we can let all the context come in, take time to think about this stuff, not just reacting to everything on the fly. Yes, they gave up both of their second-round picks to come up for TJ Sanders, but they did get the early third-rounder back from the Bears. So they only moved down 10 spots, and then they did give up a fourth-round pick as well in that trade-up. So I think the value was just fine for the Bills to make this jump. And I can't blame them for thinking that TJ Sanders wasn't going to make it to them. he's a very interesting prospect, and as we know, guys that can get after the quarterback just don't last that long. Their best option, if they had kind of stuck around and waited, in my opinion, was going to be Darius Alexander, but he's 25 years old. If you're turned off by that, I understand that as well. So this is another pick that I can get behind. You know, it's aggressive to come up and get a guy that I had ranked more of where you were originally picking. But I do think, and this is going to become a theme as we discuss this entire Bills draft, like, I love that they are swinging for upside on defense. For so long, it feels like they have really hit on like high floor players. It's been a high floor defense for a long time, but they just don't have players that scare you on that defense. I'm sorry, Bills fans. It's just the truth. I think their first 4 picks all are defensive prospects that their upside is a player that could scare you. They all have stuff to work on and development to reach, but TJ Sanders definitely falls in line with that, and his high-end pass rushing snaps are extremely exciting. He's a guy with a lot of explosiveness off the ball, a lot of athletic twitch, and he wins in a couple of exciting ways. He's got a really nice bull rush to compress the pocket, and he has beautiful kind of sidestepping, quick-hitting, finesse pass rush moves. He can attack the half man really well with swim moves and swipes to cross your face. He has the groundworks of a really nice pass rushing profile. Now, I think you need to see more consistency and more of a plan to really stem things together instead of just these really pretty looking one-off pass rush moves. I think he needs to do a better job of winning later in the rush. If he doesn't win early, he kind of gets locked up. And what you saw a lot with TJ Sanders was quarterbacks would scramble right past him because he just kind of loses control of his rush if he's not winning quickly. So there's definitely a lot to clean up there. A lot of NFL quarterbacks are going to step up and scramble right past him if he doesn't work on that. And just as a run defender, you would love if he could do something. He's a slighter player and just is kind of impractical as a run defender right now. And you're putting him now next to Ed Oliver. Like, I know a lot of Bills fans have said, let's get more of a big guy next to Ed Oliver. That's not what you're getting here in TJ Sanders. I think out the gate, you're getting someone that on pass rushing downs, you will put out there next to Ed Oliver and get after the quarterback. But I don't know that he's necessarily a 3-down option for you right away. You're hoping now trading up into the top 50 of the draft, you would prefer to get a 3-down starter with a pick like that. So still a lot to go with him, along with Maxwell Harrison, but the upside with those 2 picks is enticing, as it is getting Landon Jackson at the top of the 3rd round. This was definitely a win for me on the channel. I think in my 2-round mock draft, I had the Bills taking him at the end of the 2nd round, went on the Cover 1 show. Shout out to Greg Tomset over with the Cover 1 show and all those guys, and definitely discussed Landon Jackson as a good option for them with one of those 2 late 2nd round picks. That's effectively what they go with here with that trade down with the Bears, obviously. But the reason I like him for the Bills is his athletic tools are off the charts. He's young. He tries a bunch of pass rush moves, but just needs to get more effective with those moves, just the technique within everything he tries, and just needs to figure out how to set moves up and have more of a pass rush plan. But athletically speaking and just on tape, there's really nothing that he didn't show or flash. It's just a matter of consistency for him. He's a lengthy player. He's got size. He plays with effort and tries to defend the run. There's some pad level issues with him that he's a tall player. He's got to learn to keep those pads down so he doesn't get out leveraged all the time. But this is the sort of athletic ball of clay that they needed in that edge group. They have a bunch of high floor guys, but I think in a different edge class, a less deep edge class, a less historically deep edge class, Landon Jackson's the type of guy that probably goes and gets more buzz as like a top 50 pick or so. So I think this was a really nice pick by the Bills. And then at the top of the 4th round, they get aggressive again. They come up for Deone Walker. Last guy here I'll mention, like crazy upside along that defensive line. Upside in a different type of way. Walker's a very fascinating prospect. He's an entirely unique player. It's 6'7", 335 pounds. Just the size profile's unique there, but he's not just big. He's like quick and athletic. Very much unique in who he is as a player. My pro comp on him was just a dancing bear. Wild though, because like he does it's not like his tape just sucked. Like, he had some really impressive games. Someone that was heading into the year like a potential top 10 pick if things went well and everything went in the complete opposite direction. He played through a back injury. The production dropped off. He was better in his previous 2 seasons at Kentucky. But he wins with a swim move. He wins with lateral hitting kind of finesse style moves. He's good with his hands. I think he has excellent contact balance. Because he plays and rushes so tall, guys are going to be able to have access to his chest and really throw punches into his upper body. But he's really coordinated as an athlete for such a big guy, and he's able to just kind of absorb these punches, and with offensive linemen lunging into him, he's able to just work past them as he gets the offensive lineman unbalanced while he stays balanced. Not what you would really think of, though, for a guy this size, in that, oh, he's a 2-gapping nose tackle. No, he's actually better as a 3 technique, winning one-on-one as a pass rusher. I will say in the Georgia game, he showed some ability to take on double teams that he really didn't throughout the course of the season, so at least makes you think, oh, maybe we can coach him into doing some better run defense stuff on earlier downs. But I just think the upside is phenomenal. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. That's right where he goes here in the 4th, but I think the fit is great. Just a lot of swings at upside for the Bills, and good swings too. These aren't just blind swings at guys that did nothing in college. So big fan of the overall strategy for what they did, even if a couple of those picks at the top were a little bit earlier than I would prefer on the guys. And of course, the trade up cost on TJ Sanders. But they kept making good picks throughout day 3. Jordan Hancock makes a ton of sense. Really twitchy kind of nickel defender for Ohio State. Played a little safety, played a little slot corner. I think for a guy that has the athletic tools, I see him competing both at slot corner and safety depth. Both positions that I think they're eyeing down the road. You know, Teron Johnson's obviously a stud right now, but for a 5th round pick, 3 years from now, if Jordan Hancock's their starting nickel corner, it wouldn't stun me. But I also think that safety room is working things out, and Hancock is another one of these potential former slot corners that step back into a quarters-heavy system and have a lot of success. It's a very translatable skill set to go from the slot to playing a lot of cover 4. So just a moldable, high upside DB relative to a 5th round pick. I think it was a good spot for him to go, right where I had him graded as a 5th round guy. And then this is one of my favorite picks just to kind of think about in theory and discuss the scheme and how Jackson Haas fits in. He was a 3rd to a 4th round tight end for me as a blocking specialist. He's one of the best blocking tight ends I've evaluated in the last 3 years. And my take on this for the Bills is I would shop Dawson Knox, and if you don't get any offers, I would release Dawson Knox. And Bills fans, I'm curious what you think about that. I think that this pick right here sets you up to justify your Dalton Kincaid pick a couple years ago. I talked about Jackson Haas being kind of like a John Bates, for example, or what Brock Wright is for the Lions, as a true inline blocker that allows you to free up a receiving style tight end. Someone like Sam Laporta for Detroit, or in Commander's case last year was Zach Ertz, but hey, Zach Ertz had like a lot of production last year. But with the Bills, you know, Dalton Kincaid is just, he's more of a slot wide receiver than he is a real tight end. He can do some blocking, but putting him in line as a wide tight end, it's just not very practical. And Dawson Knox is the guy that they've used in that wide tight end role, but he's just not that good of a blocker. He's an okay blocker. I think Jackson Haas, for how they use these tight ends, is a much better player than Dawson Knox for them. And I think that can just create clarity of role within this offense and obviously improve their run game. This will allow you to actually have that, you know, diverse 12 personnel package that you really want and just smash dudes at the line with obviously a really good offensive line and Josh Allen and the threat he brings with the numbers advantage he has and what James Cook accomplished as a runner. Really excited to see if they can put this into practice and if I'm right about how good of a blocker Jackson Haas is here. I don't know that they're going to do that right away. I think they might still just mess around with Dawson Knox because he's getting paid, but that's my take on it. Just get Knox out of here and get this thing going with Jackson Haas right away because he is ready coming out of Georgia Tech here. I think in theory, it's a great pick. Let's see if they can put it to practice. And then one of the steals of day 3, in my opinion, another massive ring the bell moment for me with them taking Dorian Strong, who I had circled on that Cover One podcast interview, someone I really talked about quite a bit here as a fit for the Bills, someone that they were going to be targeting here as the ideal scheme fit, someone that had a lot of Christian Benford about him. Good size, good not great speed, but awesome tape. I think there were so many just combine underwear Olympic warriors that were drafted ahead of Dorian Strong that are not going to be as good of football players. And I don't want to put this on Maxwell Hairston. We described that as a good pick in its own right, but this is eerily familiar to me to several years ago when the Bills took Matt Elam, the athletic SEC corner, in the first round, but then found Christian Benford in the 7th round. This is eerily familiar. I don't want to put that on Maxwell Hairston, but if we look back in 2 years and Dorian Strong is the starter out of this draft that they found not Maxwell Hairston, would not surprise me. I think Strong in college was the more versatile, consistent corner than Maxwell Hairston. But obviously, the traits are very different. Dorian Strong didn't run in the 4.2s like Maxwell did. So, for whatever it's worth, a huge steal. Gives them outstanding depth, and we'll see how this one goes. You guys remember, they made Christian Benford the starter over Matt Elam week 1, so it wouldn't be absurd if they did that, as Maxwell Hairston maybe needs a little bit more development time. Going to be interesting to track that one. But then Chase Lunt, the offensive tackle out of UConn, goes at the end of the 6th round. Tough run blocker, but a size profile that terrifies the living daylights out of me. A 6'8", 300-pound tackle with tiny arms. I just don't know if, from a physics standpoint, that can play in the NFL. He would have to bulk up, in my opinion. But he is tough and had good tape at the college level, so fine enough. 6th-round pick there. And then they take Caden Prather in the 7th round. Was happy to see Prather get drafted. I had a 5th-round grade on Prather as a developmental X-wide receiver. You know, his ball skills are frustrating. He needs to play more like the physical wide receiver that he's built as. Didn't win a lot of contested catches for his profile. But to bring him in, maybe even stash him on the practice squad, the traits are there. He ran a 4.45 with good size. So why not take him at the end of the 7th round? I think that's a good pick. And then no undrafted free agent steals really stood out for me for the Bills. So ultimately, I gave the Bills an A- grade here. I think they started okay, like good, solid, okay, whatever you want to say. I think they got some good players with upside that were taken a little bit earlier than I would have preferred, but even made up some ground in the back end, getting some really athletic D-line prospects, and honestly, potentially a starting corner in the 6th round. I love what they did with the Haas pick. Excited to see how that tracks with what happens with Knox. And if Hancock's starting someday, it wouldn't surprise me either. So I went A- on the Bills. This draft made a lot of sense. And just generally from a philosophic standpoint as well, love that they are swinging for some upside and realizing, look, the depth and floor of this defense is just fine. We need some heavy hitters on this defense to get to the playoffs and get them over the hump. So hopefully, you know, the coaching can do their job and some of these guys can hit. They don't need all 4 of those top 4 picks to hit, but if 1 or 2 hit, it can be a difference-making draft. So A- for me on the Bills. Then we've got the Miami Dolphins. Talk about draft strategy, man, before we get into players. Just, can we all collectively give the Dolphins a round of applause here? Like, great job finally, like, realizing what your problem is and going trench play, focusing on the physicality aspect of this team that's been lacking. I thought last year that was going to be the strategy, and it sure as hell was not. They spent a lot of picks taking speed and running backs and all this stuff. And yeah, I know Chop Robinson worked out for them. That was a B pick for me. That, as a pass rusher, yes, absolutely. But he wasn't like a physicality, stop the run, let's get tough, right? And then they take the developmental tackle and Chris Paul. We'll see where that goes. But I think this draft screams toughness and physicality being infused into the Miami Dolphins, and I'm a big fan of that. But as we get to their 13th overall pick with Kenneth Grant, while I just praised them for the approach of physicality, I do with Kenneth Grant want to see him more consistently play with that grit and toughness that you want out of a 335-pound nose tackle. It is in there. I've seen it. When they played Ohio State, he would drop his pads, take on double teams, rush with the bull rush. Like, I've seen him play with the style that you are hoping he will. But there's a lot of games. I just think he got bored. They won the national championship in 2023. He's able to win with a swim move. He's able to knife and penetrate into the backfield and make splash plays like a athletic 3 technique. I love that that's in there, and that's something that he can do. I don't want that to be the core identity of his game, and I do think it led to a lot of inconsistency with Kenneth Grant. Really, that's what's going to make or break this pick for me on Kenneth Grant, is if they can get him to more consistently play up to his size and what you're hoping he can be great at. And that's all why I had more of a late first round grade on Kenneth Grant. And yeah, it's a little bit early for me and why this is a B grade, but I still love the overall approach. I love getting a nose tackle in that group because Zach Sealer's a good 3 technique, but not someone you want taking on double teams. So I even understand going with Kenneth Grant over Walter Nolan, who I did rank a decent bit higher than Kenneth Grant. Nolan obviously goes a few picks later, but I'm not really going to be critical of them for going Grant over Nolan if they wanted the nose tackle. So I like that pick. It got a B for me. And then they trade up and give up a lot of picks to come up and get Jonah Savaiinaea. Now, it was an expensive trade up. To move up just 9 spots, they give up a 3rd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. Now, they did get a 5th-round pick back that was just another 8 spots behind that 4th-round pick. So that one was pretty much a push. But again, giving up a 3rd-round pick to move up 8 spots for a guy you might have been able to get that, to me, was more of a mid to late 2nd into the 3rd round type of prospect. They come up and take him inside the top 40. So from a value evaluation, if you will, I think they call that a valuation, Marcus. But from a valuation standpoint, this was a little rich, but I don't hate it, frankly. I think the Dolphins need athletes on that offensive line, not just tough, good offensive linemen, but athletic offensive linemen for Mike McDaniel's system because of all of the wide zone blocking, of course, that they run, being from that Shanahan tree. But not just that, I mean, they love to pull these guys, get them out in space as lead blockers out on the perimeter in the screen game. So the pool of linemen for them that they even can draft for their system really shrinks. And that's why they've been kind of this softer team, because they have these more like athletic, lighter offensive linemen. Jonah Savaiinaea, I understand why they were drooling for him and just wanted to ensure that they could get him, even if the cost was a lot, because he brings both to the table. He's athletic and he's like 325 pounds. And I think the potential for him within this system is that of a Pro Bowl, dare I even say all-pro guard, just in terms of the fit here with the Dolphins and what Savaiinaea's upside could be. Now, he's got a lot to clean up. His reps were inconsistent. He needs to use his feet more consistently to tap into that athleticism. And, as a tackle, when they would leave him on an island in pass protection, he actually didn't look that athletic. But you did see some of the run blocking reps where you can see it. And then the testing obviously was very good with him. I get it for the Dolphins. It does ultimately end up a B grade for me because this was expensive on a guy that does still need to develop. But I'm excited to see him with the Dolphins. I think he's going to be a ton of fun. And shout out to the Hall of Fame voter that didn't even know who Jonah Savaiinaea was. Look, if you're an NFL analyst and you got a Hall of Fame vote, good on you, but don't tweet about the draft if you don't follow the draft, because Savaiinaea was like one of the top prospects at the Senior Bowl. Like, what are we doing here? Anyway, let's go to day 3 because they did give up that 3rd round pick, but I love what they did here. across the board with this Jordan Phillips pick and the trade down here. So they moved down from the 4th round, and they recoup a future 3rd round pick, a 3rd round pick next year to come down here from the Texans. And then you make a really good pick that if they would have made it with that original 4th round pick, I would have really praised the fit. This is not some absurd steal or anything like that in Jordan Phillips out of Maryland, who I did have a 5th round grade on. That's exactly where he goes here with the 5th pick in the 5th round. But just, again, round of applause for the Dolphins for sticking with this theme of physicality. This was especially the point in last year's draft where the Dolphins went with, another speed back and like smaller, speedy wide receivers like Washington and I think it was 2 Washingtons, right? The kid out of USC and is it Malik Washington out of Virginia, was it? But not this year. They get to day 3 and say, no, we can still fill out the depth of our trench play with an ideal fit of Jordan Phillips, who's a younger player, but there's just not a ton of coaching needed on him. Of course, with any young player, there's going to be some element of coaching and development, but just a rock-solid athlete that plays with great pad level, good run defense technique. He will stack you at the line, peek, shed, make plays in the run game. Not an incredible athlete, not anyone that I really project to get after the quarterback at the NFL level. That's why he's here in the 5th round. But look, you got Kenneth Grant, you got Zach Sealer. Now you have the ideal guy off the bench for a defensive tackle room that was just brutal to look at heading into this draft. So I think that's a great pick. And to add a 3rd round pick, you're going to be really happy getting there next year because the Dolphins are realistically entering a bit of a rebuild here with this roster. So I think that was an excellent move. Couldn't give this like a purple-coated certified steal, anything like that, because Phillips ultimately is a, 5th round prospect for me. But as far as day 3 moves go, love it. Then they go Carson Marshall out of Florida. I didn't get around to him, wasn't really on my radar, but an athletic, traits-based developmental outside corner. Obviously, that corner room did need to get addressed at some point. We'll see what he ends up being. So have that with a solid pick just because I didn't get to him and the traits are interesting. Then they go to Dante Trader out of Maryland. This wasn't my favorite pick. I just thought there were so many better safeties in this draft than Dante Trader. I do think he will play special teams for you, but just didn't really see a whole lot of coverage feel and certainly not a great athlete to hold up in coverage. So it just was a little bit early for me on him. I think there were some good players in the draft that were falling in this range. So that's my least favorite pick that they made. But then in the 6th round, they take the massive Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State. Someone that definitely fell in this draft process, of course, was a kind of a top 5 back heading into the year. Eerily familiar to what happened with the former Oklahoma State back in Chuba Hubbard. Now, I think Hubbard was a better prospect, ultimately still coming out. Gordon is just a plodding back, but once he gets rolling, he's got decent top speed, and I think they like him as a wide zone fit, kind of in that, kind of like a poor man's Caleb Johnson in this draft, where, yeah, you get him a few steps to build up that speed and give him good blocking in front of him, you get some explosiveness out of it, and perhaps, just gives you some size that they don't have as well as a goal line back, with, Achane and Wright being that backfield. If you got to have it 3rd and 1, you can see how efficient he can be as a short yardage back. So I think he fits in really well with their run scheme and then as a role player late in the draft, even if he's not, a top 5 back, potential, star or anything like that. But a good pick nonetheless. Then they take Quinn Ewers. Look, why not in the 7th round? That's kind of what I said about him when I broke him down in my QB video, where it's like, I'm probably letting someone else take Quinn Ewers unless we really get there to like the ass end of the 7th round. And it's like, yeah, why not? I mean, played hurt last year, maybe plays with a chip on his shoulder and carves out a nice, backup quarterback role in the league. I think he is a candidate to be like a practice squatter or that sort of like designated QB3 reserve. Do they even have that rule anymore? Did they get rid of that after a year? I don't remember, but I've kind of run out of energy to talk about Quinn Ewers. I'm not a believer. I think The inconsistency and the lack of pocket presence just terrifies the daylights out of you. But for what it's worth, I did think it was a good pick at this stage in the draft. Then Zeke Biggers, just keep adding size and physicality to that D-line. He's very much developing, but he's young. This dude is a specimen, and he tested well. Given how many teams were just kind of aiming strictly for traits in this draft, it was a draft above many years that I think teams were dismissing good tape in order to take athletes. I'm very surprised Zeke Biggers didn't go a lot earlier. I mean, this dude is the definition of traits, and it's not really for a lack of effort or physicality. It's just the technique is missing on him. So I think it's a good spot. Now he'll be the 4th or 5th D tackle, but it's a spot where he can actually get some playing time and start to work on some stuff, but also not a spot, obviously, where you need much from him. I think that's a very good pick at the end of the 7th round. And then they had a nice undrafted pickup. It's great. A lot of the wide receivers they've been quote-unquote targeting are value adds that aren't fast players. They obviously signed Nick Westbrook-Akine, which was a brilliant signing in my opinion, scheme fit-wise. But Andrew Armstrong, a guy that has 4.5 speed but catches everything, and wouldn't be surprised if they get to camp and they've got some of these speed guys down the list on their depth chart and say, you know what, Andrew Armstrong was the guy actually, making plays and catching the football in camp. Let's go with him over some of these other speedier players we've targeted in years past. So I think that was a nice pickup. I definitely thought he was draftable on day 3. So for the Dolphins, did the value always necessarily line up with every single pick? And was it this perfect A-plus draft? Not necessarily, but I think from a draft strategy perspective, it's very encouraging to see them go in the right direction here. I think the Dolphins got a lot more physical as a football team, and this is a great draft to kind of lay the groundwork for a 2-year rebuild, where I think you get a starting nose tackle, a starting guard, a really useful 3rd defensive tackle, an effective big back, a nice project in Zeke Biggers, a cheap backup quarterback behind your expensive Tua Tagovailoa, maybe even a wide receiver 3 down the road in undrafted free agency. Just really nice draft for the Miami Dolphins, and I give the Dolphins a B+ for this one. Then we have the New York Jets, who start things off by going chalk with Armin Membu. We've been talking about this for months, right? You looked at that roster and said, well, they got one gaping hole, and that's at right tackle, and the prospect that's probably going to be the best player available for them at the time is Armin Membu. So just kind of line it up, knock them down. I will say I really love how this offensive line is shaping up, and kind of right, par for the course with Aaron Glenn and Engstrand coming over from Detroit, where the offensive line was the staple of the rebuild. I think the first pick they made when Dan Campbell took over there was Penei Sewell. I don't know that Membu's going to be that good. I mean, his traits are pretty nutty. He could be one of the best right tackles in the NFL, but Sewell's obviously, in his own territory there. But same idea, right? Just incredible size, athletic combination, young player coming out. Still some glitches in his technique to weed out over time. I think he can react to the bull rush a little bit better and get better at that hop set technique, because you would see him kind of get knocked back occasionally because he does have shorter arms, and you want to see him be able to reset, use his feet better there. And, I think in the run game, he needs to be a little bit more accurate with his hands. Keep working on the, run blocking drills. Make sure you're putting your hands in the right place. You can sustain blocks even better. But awesome, no-brainer, A-grade pick. Everything lined up there, and good job to get it done. And then they go Mason Taylor in the 2nd round. This is about the very top of when I would have started considering Mason Taylor. I get it, though. Swinging for a tight end with upside obviously is something a lot of teams were looking to do in this draft. But a couple other teams, the Rams and the Seahawks, took players not long after this that just aren't nearly the level of prospects that Mason Taylor is. So to get him ahead of that run made sense. I still think there's some risk involved with him. He's another one of these kind of undersized tight ends that if he doesn't get better as a blocker, it's you kind of got to find a way to use them. And more often than not, it feels like these guys just aren't really, reaching that theoretical upside in the league, if that makes sense. The Noah Fants, the Dalton Kincaids, shit, even like Kyle Pitts. Like, there's a little bit of that to Mason Taylor. But I will say, pretty crazy, right? We saw Ben Johnson come right out and get his version of Sam Laporta in Colston Loveland. And I think that's probably what Engstrand and this kind of Lions-based staff sees in Mason Taylor here. And I don't think that's a terrible thought. I think there is a lot of Sam Laporta as a prospect in Mason Taylor. Sam Laporta, who went right in this range. So if he works out in that sense, I don't think it's crazy at all. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to take that chance here. Still super young. He's got the genes. He's Jason Taylor's son. So, I ultimately had him as a late 2, early 3 level prospect. So I'm not going to give this an A grade. But given the fit, I think this could really work out for him. And I really like the pick. Then you get to the 3rd round, and this is just I'm kind of putting myself out there with this take. I know I'm definitely against consensus on Azariah Thomas. I had him as a late 3, early 4. I'm worried about this pick. I'm going to bet against this pick, and we're going to have some fun and look back on it in a couple years. Now, I think it's a totally rational decision by the New York Jets to take Azariah Thomas, who by consensus was kind of a top 60 to 75 player. I had him as more of a late 3rd, early 4th guy, more in the 100 range. So this is a little bit early for me on Thomas. I'm giving this a C grade. And look, I get it. I am against consensus on this. I'm just telling you what I saw here and why this pick concerns me and why I would have gone in a different direction. I understand that Aaron Glenn wants a press man corner. That is his system. He has made no mistakes about that coming over from New Orleans where they did that. And then the last couple of years in Detroit, they've really looked for these physical press man guys. That's what Azariah Thomas did at Florida State. My question on him is if he's going to be able to do that at the NFL level with 4.6 speed. I really broke this down in my cornerback rankings video where I put Thomas as my 11th ranked corner, and a lot of people were like, you're nuts, he's way better than that. I'm betting against his game translating to the next level, especially now that the book is out that he's a slower corner. And before he ran that at his pro day, I had written down speed concerns, wide receivers separating over the top, quarterbacks not looking his way and testing him deep. Now that the book is out, as him as a 4.6 speed guy, NFL teams are going to come out and challenge him vertically down the field in this division where you have to cover, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle for the Dolphins. You have to cover the Josh Allen deep ball who's going to headhunt at a guy like this. You now have to cover Kyle Williams for the Patriots, who's got great vertical speed with Drake May. That's just within this division. At Florida State, they ran a ton of cover 1 and left him on an island one-on-one. And again, he was physical. He had great technique. He had good production, but college quarterbacks just weren't willing to test him 30 yards down the field where you did see wide receivers really start to pull away from him. The Jets are going to want to probably lead the league in cover 1 or be right around that territory. I don't really think you can run cover 1 with Azariah Thomas unless you're consistently shading your safety over the top and giving him that help. It's just not really a world I want to live in with a starting cornerback as a backup that, in a game plan specific deal where your starting corner goes down and Thomas has to come in and you help him a little bit over the top when you do run man coverage. That's fine, but that's more of a day 3 pick in my opinion. For me, the best case projection from Azariah Thomas was like a Rasul Douglas, who was slow and struggled for many, many years in the league, but eventually became such a heady, smart player, as I think Thomas could, because he's a good football player, smart player and all that, become more of an off-zone corner where you can play cover 4 and win with your eyes on the QB. But that's not even necessarily what the Jets want to do here. So I'm betting against this as a projection. It's not that this isn't a theoretical scheme fit. He played press man in college. That's what the Jets are going to want to do. I understand it. I'm betting against that that's what he's going to be at the next level. And we're just going to have to look back on this in a couple years, and I could look like an idiot and I overthought this, or I could have been onto something there. We'll see how that goes. Personally, I think better picks for them would have been Siobhan Ravel, who was there, or even a Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State, who I think is the better projection as a press man corner to the league. It's not some egregious pick. Like, it's not an irrational decision. I totally understand. I'm like against consensus on him, and he's not a horrible player. At a 3rd or 4th round grade on him at the end of the day. But I'm going to give this one a C, and we'll see how that one goes. But then you get to day 3. They joined in on this run of vertical threats, and I did put a 5th round grade on Arian Smith because I knew that in the NFL, if you want someone that can take the top off the defense, that is one of the cheat codes that you can have in your offense if the guy can just be a practical player, and these guys are going to go. So that's why I had Shamare, DK, Dante Thornton as 3rd, 4th round guys, and then I had Arian Smith not far behind those guys as a 5th round guy. Still a little bit earlier than I'd prefer to take him here. The dude just can't catch a football, and at 24 years old, is that going to change? I don't know. I had Mecole Hardman as a pro comp on him, so do I think he works out? No, but I understand that, like, if you want to take a chance on a vertical threat, you kind of have to get him there at the top of the 4th round where we saw that run. So I think overall, maybe my biggest criticism on this Jets draft as a whole is not walking out of this draft with, a potential number 2 wide receiver to complement Garrett Wilson, because I think there were some opportunities to find that guy. If Arian Smith alone is very much a risky prospect for some reasons, being the ball skills, I'd rather roll the dice on someone like Alec Iomanner, who went just a few picks later to the Titans. Jalen Royals was still on the board. Or if you just wanted to stick with this vertical threat, I had Jalen Lane higher rated as a true vertical presence. So, I understand where they were going with this one. I think there were a lot of better picks that could have been made in that spot. So not a huge fan of that one. But they go and totally redeem themselves by taking Malachi Moore, the safety out of Alabama, at the end of the 4th round. I think he's a potential starter for them, if not now, down the road. Tony Adams is there. Cisco's in on a 1-year deal. I don't know that Moore beats those guys out right away, but definitely a value for me. I thought Moore was a really high floor potential, emergency starting option in the middle of this draft. Just, again, not the fastest guy, not the biggest guy, but incredibly smart. Played over 3,000 snaps in a complex, still Nick Saban defense, even though Saban left this year, but he obviously played many, many years for Nick Saban. Just communicates well on the back end. He's got really good feet. He can turn and run. Tackles really well. Just so much to like in Malachi Moore's game. I think a lot of worse safeties went before him, and he's gonna be a nice piece to have, in my opinion. Then they go Francisco Mauigoa out of Miami. I didn't get to him out of the 21 linebackers I watched. However, the physical and testing profile on him is insane, so I understand. Take the dart throw on the traits and try to coach him up. Never really going to knock a team for going developmental linebacker later on day 3, which at this point you're approaching the 6th round there. And then they take Tyler Barron a few picks later, edge out of Miami. Athletic guy, has some upside. I like him as a backup edge. If anything were to happen to Will McDonald or Jermaine Johnson, I think he can come in and get you a couple pressures throughout the course of the game as a nice backup. He's kind of caught in between, being a great pick because, I don't see him being a presence as an early down run defender, and I don't see him ever becoming a good enough pass rusher to be a full-time starter. So he's pretty specifically lined up as a backup to your pass rushers, but there's room for one of those guys on your roster, and they don't really have that guy right now. So I'm cool with it. I thought it was a good pick at that range. And then in terms of undrafted free agents, they grabbed Donovan Edwards out of Michigan. I'm at least intrigued by him. Obviously, cover athlete for College Football 25, played at Michigan, national champion, all that good stuff. He just never was able to get back to his 2022 form, and it sounds like he played through some kind of knee injury, I think it was. Might have even been a partial patellar tendon injury. And then he had surgery that offseason after 2022 where he played on that injury and just didn't really have the same explosiveness. His breakaway percentage dropped off. He ended up kind of just being a rotational back. So, probably, nothing here, but just in case, bring him in, see how he looks throughout camp. And, in 2022, he kind of looked like Aaron Jonesy to me. So if you steal that, worth bringing in for, if nothing else, as an undrafted pickup. But overall, I gave the Jets a B grade, some ups and some downs. So I think that grade makes a lot of sense. And let's go ahead and move on to the New England Patriots, who made 10 picks in this draft. And they start by taking Will Campbell with the 4th overall pick. I will admit, I think I was a little too harsh on this when I did my immediate first-round reactions. And seeing them still get a wide receiver on day 2 makes me feel even a little bit better. We talk about, sometimes those grades can change based on seeing how the plan plays out for these teams. And I think C was harsh, which is what I gave them on that first night. So I will up it to a B, Patriots fans. He's still a top 10 prospect for me and a high floor left tackle option for them. And just after kind of stewing on it more, I can be talked into the idea that they were a little afraid of Membu switching from right to left, and that they just wanted the immediate floor so that they can hopefully hit the ground running with Drake May in year 2. I can get behind that. I still do question if he has the upside as a left tackle to ultimately be worth a top 4 pick, and I think it will be fun to kind of compare him to Armin Membu in this division, who goes 3 picks later, who I still think I might have been willing to take the bet on him making that switch to the left side, because I think he's such a great athlete, and we've seen so many guys do that as of late, whether it's Tristan Wirfs or Talise Fuanga for the Saints. I wouldn't have been maybe as afraid of that as the Patriots could have been there. But I also, just personally speaking, had 4 blue chip players in this draft class. 2 of them went before you picked, in Carter and Hunter. I understand not going running back with Ginty, but I do beg the question of if this team, who has time and time again struggled to find that wide receiver answer for them. Last year, I slammed this team for not taking Ladd McConkey, trading down and ending up with Baker. Obviously, different context here, but I am going to beg the question of if they should have taken T-Mac, Tet McMillan, who was one of those 4 blue chip prospects for me. So that is why this is ultimately a B, and those are the sort of dings on the pick, if you will, but it's still a good pick. You get a high floor left tackle who does enter the league with awesome technique. His hand usage is phenomenal. You don't really have to coach him up. You know exactly what you're getting, and you shouldn't have to worry about it, but it's not like this is a guy that's not going to get beat. I do look at some of those games against guys like Shamar Stewart and various other SEC rushers that you're obviously watching him as you go tape to tape on Will Campbell, and his tape wasn't this just like shut down left tackle that just entered the league with arm length concerns like a Rashawn Slater was coming out. Campbell did take his losses. I actually thought Membu's tape in pass protection was better and more consistent against the same exact players that Will Campbell was going against. So I just want to reiterate that. I just don't think Campbell's going to be a dominant left tackle, but I do think he's going to be a good one. And we're going to land on a B grade for this pick. But I am, again, going to be critical of this 6th pick in the 2nd round where they go Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. Not a big fan of this one, personally. You pass on Luther Burden, who I think could have been just a colossal win for you. And if you're not going to take T-Mac in the 1st, grab Luther Burden, who's sitting there in the 6th round, man. Come on. And if you want to go even a step further than that, I think there were edge rushers that really could have helped you in this range too. An edge group of Harold Landry and Anthony Jennings and Kayvon Chason. And yeah, Keon White will do some edge stuff. He'll do some interior stuff. He's the best in that quote-unquote edge group, but that's not all he plays. That's not going to cut it for me. Not long after this pick, we see Donovan Ezeraku come off the board, who was right in your backyard out of Boston College. I think Nick Scorton as well, who went about 10 picks later to the Carolina Panthers, would have been phenomenal. But especially Ezeraku, man, was right in your lap. To take Travion Henderson, who's a luxury pick, And I've even done this. I did a mock draft where I traded out of this pick because all the wide receivers were gone. And at the end of the second round, when all the edge rushers were gone, then I took Travion Henderson. So it's not that I don't understand the fit and how he brings explosiveness and an awesome pass catching back to the table here. But again, very much a luxury pick. I had him as more of a late second, early third round guy. This is still a top 50 pick in the draft. That conversation changes here when some of those first round caliber prospects are starting to fall that we named. Overall, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's a C graded pick here for all the reasons we described. I do like Travion Henderson on this Patriots team. He's going to bring some juice. I do think you had at least another year of that in Antonio Gibson. I know he's not a long-term answer for you, and you're hoping Henderson's going to be even better than that, and certainly more consistent pass protector for you. But yeah, this certainly was not my favorite pick, especially at the time. I was terrified because I was like, who the hell is playing wide receiver for the Patriots here? They do make up a lot of ground here with Kyle Williams, where if they didn't make maybe this exact pick here in the third round, or maybe an Alec Io manner, I would have been really terrified of this draft. But at least you get somebody in this draft that projects as a potential starting wide receiver. Out of this draft, again, I look at those top couple picks and said, we had an opportunity to take McMillan. We had an opportunity to take Luther Burden. Kyle Williams is nice, but he's a consolation prize relative to what you could have had, especially in a deep running back class. I would have much rather gone Burden early and then came back with all of the various pass-catching backs that were also good in this draft later. But anyway, Kyle Williams, great pick here, right? I had a third-round grade on him. That's where he ultimately goes. Reminds me a ton of Darnell Mooney. There's a little bit of Darius Slayton in his game as well. I think ultimately how good his hands end up being at the next level is where he's going to land on that scale. But I do think kind of worst-case scenario, Darius Slayton for him is kind of on the money. He has the same ability to stack corners on the outside, that same kind of like building vertical speed, the ability to run under the deep ball. He's going to be a great fit with Drake May, who's going to be able to just send it down the field and let Kyle Williams run under it. I love this fit. I think he has a good chance of leading this team in receiving yards this year, and I know people are screaming watching this video right now, like, they signed Stefon Diggs. Look, Stefon Diggs turns 32 years old this year. He's coming off an ACL injury. It's a nice signing for what it is, but that should not really factor in to making sure you can get the right receivers in place for Drake May when you're still trying to build up the core of this team. But I think Kyle Williams, with how he fits in this team, depending on how good Stefon Diggs is at his age coming off the injury, I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Williams was like a 900-yard receiver here with a lot of explosive plays for this team. He's also really good after the catch as well. He's super shifty. I think he flashes good route running. I wasn't quite as high on his route running as I know a lot of people were. A lot of people were super high on Kyle Williams. They're going to probably look at this as like the steal of the draft. And, I respect the opinions of those people that feel that way too. But I see a starting Z wide receiver in the league, and you get him here in the third round. That's an excellent draft pick. Then we go to the 31st pick in the third round, and they take Jared Wilson out of Georgia. I think this is the right landing spot for him as more of a day one backup, but developmental center with just awesome upside, incredible athlete. His high-end plays really get you excited. But just a one-year starter at Georgia. I think there's still a lot for him to learn. I want to see him continue to bulk up a little bit. And I just felt like he was a little bit clunky getting out of his stance when snapping the football. I do think he could potentially play guard. That's what he was for Georgia for the first 3 years. He's got longer arms, and, a 6'3" guard isn't unheard of. They've got one on this team in Mike Nwenu. So it's a really nice landing spot. Whether he's a guard or a long-term developmental replacement for Garrett Bradbury, loved the value of this landing spot to round out day 2. And then you go to the third day of the draft. They kick things off taking Craig Woodson at the very top of the 4th round. Not a bad pick. I did have a 4th round grade on Craig Woodson, and I see how he fits inside this defense. If they were looking for a true rangy free safety to come in, if they, want to play, dime packages and have someone on the back end that can, ball hawk and show some ball skills and that kind of stuff. Craig Woodson definitely fits the bill there. They have Kyle Duggar, they have Jabril Peppers to start and be strong safeties for them. But, as a dime package safety in the 4th round and kind of a developmental prospect, I like it as a fit. Then they grab Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. I mean, talk about replacing Devon Godshaw with the snap of a finger. Love that. You get cheaper with essentially the same player, man, and a really good run defender that's not the biggest guy in the world. But Farmer's awesome taking on one-on-one blocks. Just same idea. Early down run defender that will now kind of allow time for Christian Barmore and Milton Williams to either, in the case of Milton Williams, play more of a 4-eye gap shooting role in a odd front, base 3-4 defense, or if you're in a, more of a even front type of nickel early down situation, you can just let Barmore and Milton Williams kind of rotate and stay fresh for pass rush downs and let Farmer do a lot of the dirty work. Barmore, a guy with injury concerns, you can take some of those snaps away, reduces exposure to injury potential too. So really like how he fits in with this D-line. I think the value was really good, but the fit especially makes that a great pick. Then they get Braden Swinson in the 5th round. Something is going on behind the scenes, whether it's injuries or off-field with him, because he was a very clear day 2 talent. I didn't see him as the highest upside edge rusher or anything like that. I did think he had potential to eventually emerge as a number 2 starter opposite of a top guy on a defensive line. But if nothing else, is a number 3 edge that can do a little bit of everything for you. Really exceptional pick here in the 5th round. Assuming the reason he fell isn't something that we should be more concerned about on the outside than clearly teams were on the inside. But I do think just the tape, the player, the value is an absolute steal there. Excited to see how he works out. And then I didn't get to any of their day 3 picks. You had a traits-based developmental tackle prospect in Marcus Bryant, who is huge out of Missouri. Solid process there in the 7th round. They take a long snapper very, very late. Fine, get a cheap, cost-controlled long snapper. I get it. And then they take kind of a versatile defensive back out of Memphis in Kobe Minor with Mr. Irrelevant there. Solid enough. They did have some interesting free agent pickups there. Some classic Patriots-y guys. Lan Larison, just, an athletic pass-catching back out of the backfield who's fascinating. Efton Chisholm, I watched at the Shrine Bowl, didn't eventually get to his write-up, but definitely looked the part of a kind of lesser athletic but quick route running slot wide receiver. You get the type, the Patriots type. Funny that he landed here. And then Elijah Ponder, a very traitsy player out of, I think, Cal Poly Tech, was it? But yeah, why not pick that guy up as an undrafted free agent with the way he tested? So definitely some free agent names that stood out as well. Overall, I do like the Patriots draft. I gave this a B+ grade. I ended up coming around on the Campbell pick a little bit more based on what I said about it after night 1. But we obviously mentioned our question marks about the pick, and then really the only thing I didn't like was the Travion Henderson pick, but even then it's he's gonna be an explosive player for this team. I just think with a pick that high they could have done more impactful things for this football team, but obviously a lot of good picks on day 3 there that we really liked, and ultimately I think this is a very good draft for the Patriots looking back on it. So B+ to round out our AFC East here. And that is gonna do it. Definitely let me have it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on my grades from this video. Ultimately, if I was critical of a player, I obviously hope I'm wrong. I'm just being honest about what I saw here heading into the draft. But as we head out, if you could, again, please take just a second to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of my draft grades videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Peace out.